This week, Kumar and Jordan discuss 3 Warren Ellis books published by Avatar: Black Summer, No Hero, and Supergod. First, we're getting closer to unlocking a new podcast about the manga Fullmetal Alchemist, The Law of Equivalent Exchange. It's a chapter-by-chapter reading of the manga, analyzing how creator Hiromu Arakawa masterfully put together the story of Edward and Alphonse Elric, with commentary on the translation. What are we missing from the original Japanese? Even translation of the sound effects can be a bit tricky. Patrick and I have already started recording the show, and we can't wait for you to hear it. If you're a fan of Fullmetal Alchemist, one of the best manga of the 21st century, pledge now at patreon.com/deconcomics to hear The Law of Equivalent Exchange.
This is Kumar.
This is Jordan.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Kumar and Jordan in Melbourne. This is Jordan's first time on the show. He's my next door neighbor, literally my next door neighbor, because I'm in 33 and he's in 33A. You'd think we'd be in the same room together.
We very nearly are. We're probably about 10 meters away from one another.
yeah, but and I think we're actually allowed to be in each other's houses, but there's just no convenient way to set up a recording area for two of us and still be far enough apart that I don't catch your dirty swine flu.
That's
right. So here we are.
We could have worn masks, I suppose, but it might have interfered with the audio quality.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to be talking about a few different series by Warren Ellis today. It took us quite a while to decide which ones. There was kind of a long path that we got to before we reached the stage where okay, we'll do these ones. And we've kind of talked in the past before about how Ellis he's almost a writer that nobody talks about, but he's had some massive stuff, and we've done Transmetropolitan on the show. And right. I mean, the version of Iron Man that you see in the movies is basically the Ellis version of Iron Man. And he had those 2 movies were adapted from Red, and I think he's got the Castlevania series on Netflix now.
That's right.
So he's out there, and there's a constant stream of product. It's usually about espionage and or body modification technology every month. It's just coming out. Most of it seems to not get noticed, but it goes past anyway, like the buses. So this episode started with a book called Cressy, which yes. You had bought, which was a one-off about England's wars in France in around the 1100s or something. And you lent that to me, and it was a part of a line of books that Ellis did called Apparat for Avatar. Avatar? No. What? Anyway.
I lent it to someone else already, so I can't check.
Okay, and it was drawn by an artist whose name I don't remember, and his name wasn't even on the cover. Only Ellis's name was. It was very cheeky. And that guy was kind of a cheap clone of Juan Jose Reap, we're going to be talking about quite a bit today, who himself started out as a cheap copy of Jotaro, and that's a whole other conversation. And I lent you those hard-boiled, my copies of hard-boiled, because of that conversation came up. And so you had heard about Cressy for some reason and bought it, and then you lent it to me, and I thought it was excellent. I said, okay, let's do an episode about some of these Apparat books. So I go onto Wikipedia for Apparat. It lists 4 titles. And Cressy, I think, was not even one of those 4. I was like, okay, that's weird. Then I go to the Warren Ellis wiki page, and it lists 8 Apparat books. And I go online, and they're almost impossible to find. So it's that whole thing about how Ellis he's this kind of weird, he seems to be... he's out there writing a ton of stuff, but nobody seems to know what's going on, including Wikipedia. So we battered around a bunch of ideas. Finally, you suggested these three series, which we're going to talk about, called No Hero, Supergod, and Black Summer.
Yes.
They're all from about 2007 to 2009 from Avatar. Two of them are drawn by Reap. They're Obama era, which is, I think, a key point in some ways. And you chose them because they're kind of, I guess you thought they were thematically interconnected.
Well, Warris himself has stated that he considers them a thematic trilogy.
Right.
I've got
Okay.
a quote which I can read now or later where he says that.
Okay. But they're also about espionage and body modification technology. They're all kind of riffs on Marvel Man and Watchmen. So I guess your mileage is going to be like, how much you like them is, I guess, how might depend on how high a regard you hold Marvel Man and Watchmen, because they're a bit
Derivative.
derivative, maybe in some ways, but I'd say it's more shallow. And it's funny because I feel like each series has a thesis about superheroes, and we'll get to those. But I feel like at one point I thought, oh, he should have just put all these into one really dense comic, one series. Like, why does one have to be like, one of them is what if superheroes were like liberals, and one is like, what if superheroes were gods?
Yes.
And it's like, what if these were all in one? And then I thought, okay, then it would just be a Watchmen ripoff, really. So he almost had to unbolt them from each other to make it not a Watchmen ripoff, but it's still, you can kind of see the fingerprints all over it. But the other funny thing about this is, so you suggested these three titles.
Yes.
Something about the title of Supergod or the cover, it seemed familiar. And I was like, wait a second, did you lend this to me before? And the answer was yes. And it has to have been from the last 18 months.
Yes.
And I did not remember a single thing about it. And I read it, and it was completely fresh. And it's got like a Krishna superhero in there. I was like, this is something I would have latched onto. And I didn't somehow. It just like evaporated from my memory.
That's hardly a ringing endorsement.
It's not. It's pretty bad. And then so I read all the books, and then I set them aside for a week, and then I reread them all a second time, Supergod for a third time, and then I started writing my notes. And as I was writing my notes, I couldn't remember the title of Black Summer, and I had read it like a day before or something, and I was like, what was that called again? And then we were going to record this last week, and we got delayed, and I'm like, uh-oh, it's been a week. And yeah, sure enough, I'm sitting here on Sunday, and I'm going like, I'm looking at my notes going, I don't remember some of these things happening. But anyway, so that's the long preamble of how we kind of got here. So I guess the question is the problem my memory, or are these... what's your overall vibe of these books? Is it stuff that I should be remembering? Is it super good, or is it derivative, or where do we want to come into this?
I like Ellis's stuff. I like the way he writes, and I like his futurism. He's sometimes described as a futurist. I like his body modification. I like the effort that he puts in to make some of the science sound semi-plausible.
Yep.
I like that kind of thing. So thematically, yeah, I mean, if you're a big Alan Moore fan and and you particularly like Watchmen and Marvel Man, it's not going to seem particularly fresh or interesting, I suppose. But I like his stuff. I like his humor. I like a lot about it.
Yeah.
So but look, about as far as it not latching onto the comics, particularly in terms of memory. I mean, I had just before we started, I had to look up some of the names of some of the characters again, particularly for No Hero, because there's nobody likable in that comic.
Right.
They're all just horrible people.
Right.
They're not. There's no one that's interesting. There's no moral dilemmas.
Yeah.
They're just jerks from start to finish. And I had to look up their names because the characters are just really uninteresting in No Hero in particular.
Yeah. I think and in Black Summer too, they all kind of, or Was it? So like there's another team that shows up and they're all wearing the same. Now the problem is both of these, Black Summer and No Hero, are both drawn by Reap, so they're so similar that I had trouble separating them a little bit. But yeah, certainly this other team shows up and they're all just kind of wearing black uniforms and they're so generic that it's
they're the industrial,
right.
they're the mass produced like Black Ops superheroes. They're not
right.
superheroes themselves. So, whereas the original team in Black Summer was a team of vigilantes called the Seven Guns, all of whom are sort of bright, idealistic young people.
Yeah.
Who have a specialty, a technical specialty or an imaginative specialty, and they each work with some sort of mad scientist character called Frank Blacksmith. And they're all unique, and they go into some detail as to their backgrounds and their motivations in some flashback sort of pages throughout the comics. But as you say, you're not the all black team that shows up. They're the ones that have been mass produced by the military industrial complex.
Right.
The administrations, like the American government's counter to the threat that the vigilante superheroes represents.
Okay.
Because of course, are we going into detail about plot? I mean,
yeah, for sure, absolutely. No. Let's go into. I mean, they're 10 years old, and I mean, some of these we have to talk about the spoilers to. I think even two of these end up with people being thrown into space. Is that right, or am I misremembering that?
That happens in both of them.
That's the climax of both, is they throw the bad guy into space or something like that?
It's the climax of No Hero, the second one, where the I suppose, is he the antagonist? I mean, it seems like it's nothing but antagonists in No Hero.
Okay, well, let's start with Black Summer. So we talked about it's like these superheroes, they're these called the Seven Guns. They've got something called gun enhancements. They all kind of came from one city, which they always called Our City, which is never named, but they always call it Our City.
It's Detroit.
Oh, it's Detroit. Okay.
Well, no. I have no idea, but it's just this lawless collapse.
I assumed it was New York, and in fact, I don't know if it's lawless because they talked about like tanks in the streets and stuff like that. So I think.
Well,
I think we learned it's been
some detail about it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
The Seven Guns initially formed because law and order had collapsed, sort of like civil infrastructure in their city had collapsed.
Okay. And
the municipal governments had contracted out law enforcement to Blackwater types. So mercenaries, essentially.
Right.
Mercenaries that weren't even, it was a plot point that somewhat that they weren't even American. They were, and they essentially had shoot-on-sight orders, and the city was a total mess. So the Seven Guns became vigilantes and sort of retook the city.
Right, from the authorities, effectively,
yes.
Not from the crime, but from the tanks and guns, like where the police had become fascist.
Yeah, the paramilitary cops.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's something about there's a lot of talk about corruption and there's a lot of talk about crime, but as you say, it's essentially how you say that American Second Amendment fantasy of virtuous citizens,
right,
resisting corrupt authority.
Right. So there's a line there. Somebody says something about the superheroes or the guns being like crazy people who see crime every time they look at any kind of authority.
Yes.
So I guess so before we go further into the plot, let's try to figure out what this is thematically, or let's try to tease out the thesis of this one. I think so. It seems to be like, what if superheroes were, or what if superheroes were a response to fascism, or what if superheroes were liberal, or?
Yes, I mean, if I can refer to my notes briefly, I've written down like 3 questions which I think sum up.
Okay.
Kind of like
Perfect.
3. I've written, what happens when the Justice League try to run the world?
Okay. That's a good one.
What happens when the Justice League do run the world in No Hero? And what happens when the Justice League, spoilers, destroy the world?
Okay. Right. Okay. So that really that boils it right down. Right. So one of these guys, John Horace, who's this hero that's got these floating eyeballs around him that like are his powers. A lot of the powers are
They're very vague, aren't they?
a little bit vague.
He's sort of an Iron Man, or maybe Superman XP.
I guess one of them blows up and it's like a little nuclear explosion. I don't know. There's all sorts of stuff. Anyway,
So it's the point that his gear is secret as well.
Right, that's right. That's right. So even the head guy, the Frank Blacksmith, doesn't know how the eyes work, and that's kind of the problem because when John Horace loses his shit and he kills the president because he decides things are.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, it was fine when they were restoring order in a collapsed kind of like American city, but when it's this idea of virtuous armed citizens striking against corrupt authority is taken to its maximum extreme, which is John Horace assassinates the president, who is, I think, it's pretty much George W. Bush.
Yeah, and he demands free elections, right?
Yes.
So it's a real kind of fanboy power fantasy, I think. Well, I mean, I say that in an accusatory way, but it's the kind of thing I fantasize about all the time. Oh, what if I could just mentally make XYZ's brain explode from here just by thinking about it? But yeah, he kills the president and he like demands free elections.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, okay, but it's funny because that's kind of like what's wrong with free elections. But Frank Blacksmith sees that he's out of control and things are. He's become a fascist himself by doing this, by demanding free elections effectively. And like he's like, is he going to be happy with the results, or is he going to keep, assassinating whoever it is until he gets the result he wants, which is, I guess, the natural outcome. And some of the team are like, actually, what's wrong with what he did, and the others are like, no, this is crazy. We have to stop this. We have to turn ourselves in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a very it's very post-Watchmen. Like there are no sound effects. There are no thought balloons, which means sometimes characters talk to themselves out loud. Just because they've gone with these arbitrary things that are from Watchmen. There's even some pages that are in 9-panel grids. Yes. So it's hard to not think about it. But the problem is, especially the no sound effects, and it's not as bad in this series, but it's really bad in No Hero, is when then Jose Juan Reap draws something being struck or like a cell phone ringing, it's like this juicy splash that comes out of whatever it is. Like if somebody grabs a handrail, especially there's a scene in No Hero, somebody grabs a handrail and there's this weird orange juicy splash that comes out of the hands. I'm like, what is that? Is that his superpower? No, that's the way he draws. Effect. That's the way he draws something, an impact.
It's a visual sound effect.
And whenever a cell phone rings, there's this weird blue juice that flies out of it. And
right. Okay. So I guess we're talking about the art now, which is
yeah.
I don't like the art in Black Summer and No Hero. Like, yeah, I often find it hard to know what's going on in the action scenes.
Yeah, it's pretty rough in the action. And when you're doing a superhero book, if somebody has orange juice coming out of their hands. And we don't know what their powers are. It's like, is that some energy power? No. And every time, like, the camera flashes, they're blue juice. It's really weird. But anyway, so that's a problem because just use sound effects. Why do we have to do this?
Sound effects are childish, and this is a grown-up comic.
I guess.
I don't understand why there's veins on everyone. Like, sorry, while we're talking about the art. Like, the people will be in repose, and they're just bulging with veins.
Yeah.
Like, has this guy just been benching? Is that why?
Yeah, and then, anytime a woman walks in, like, the camera swoops down to a below-the-butt angle, so we got a butt shot in there.
I guess, like, girls want to see veins and guys want to see butts. Is that the artist's idea?
Yes, yeah, I guess. But, yeah, but the thing about Reap versus Jeff Darrow was Jeff Darrow would draw a ridiculous amount of detail into a scene or a panel, and you would sit there and stare because you're going to find all sorts of little people doing crazy things. It's like Where's Wally kind of stuff. Whereas Reap is just like when he draws something shattering, it's just a billion pieces of shattered glass. You don't really have to look at it or stare
Yeah.
at it, and it really just kind of confuses.
I must admit, my eyes just slide over some of those
Right.
page panels where there's all that stuff going on, and it's unlike Hardboiled, especially the first book of Hardboiled, where I think I described it to Ashwin as "Where's Wally from Hell." There's all this great detail that's fun to look at, but there's nothing like that in Black Summer.
Yeah. In fact, if you're staring at it, it's mostly to figure out, is that a fist hitting a chest, or what am I looking at here?
Yeah,
And
there was a page where, I think, where the big guy, the Dominic, the Hulk XB,
yeah.
he the scene where he dies, it's a page. He's shot in the back, and then someone's in front of him, and then they put a gun in his mouth and kill him. And I don't understand where anyone is standing on this page, or how someone got in front of him, or it's just chaos.
Yeah.
I just didn't really like it at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, otherwise it was basically, except for that, the action scenes and the weird squishy juice that flew out of stuff all the time. I mean, it was fine, and it's better than. I mean, I think his art has gotten better than his earlier stuff, which was even more derivative of Darrow.
He read Hardboiled and this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a 2-page spread at some stage during this big fight where there's all sorts of, again, tiny shards of everything all over the place. And it doesn't really matter, but there's also like a giant Doraemon that's been knocked over or something, and 1 or 2 city signs. That's a very Jeff Darrow thing to like throw in a million of those things, but he just has like 1 or 2. But you can tell, like, as soon as you see that, it's like, oh yeah, this guy worships Darrow, and that was kind of how he ended up drawing the way he does.
Okay. Yeah. Well, is that all we're going to say about the art for now?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's all. I mean, because there wasn't really, oh, yeah, and the butt shots too. So there's kind of that, but it's kind of the same. I don't know.
A lot of comics are like that, aren't they? Especially just the standard Marvel DC stuff. There always seems to be a lot of butts.
Yeah, but it's really obvious in Reap because the quote unquote camera always swings down to make sure he doesn't miss his chance.
Right, and we object to this. We object to this.
Yeah, I object to it on the grounds that it's just ridiculous and distracting, and it's not.
Yes, it is. It's a distraction.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know. It's not. I don't know if it's really adding anything to. It's funny how non-sexual. There's except for Supergod, there's no real discussion of anybody's romantic lives.
No,
to any extent.
I mean, and Supergod. Well, what's the romance? The romance between the mushroom monster and the people that worship it.
The masturbating scientists, which we'll talk about at length.
We're getting ahead of ourselves
when we get to it. Yeah.
Anything else about Black Summer as far as the response to John Horace killing the president and announcing that everyone's going to hold free elections under his supervision is about what you'd expect.
Yeah.
They send in the army, and the army gets creamed by the vigilantes with their superpowers. So then they send in the black ops.
Right.
The guys the original mad scientist inventor Frank Blacksmith, who helped the vigilantes create their weapons, he ends up working for the government and helps them to make these mass-produced superheroes for the purpose of taking out the Seven Guns, as he saw it, when they eventually became crazy and tried to run America to their own standards.
So do we understand how what is it literally a gun? Because for some of them it does seem to be a gun, but like one of them just flies around and one is super fast. Is there a gun involved, or?
They have guns, but I think it's just a byword for the process that gives them their superpowers. They've just got gun enhancement. So like they could be called the living bullets, but instead they're called the seven. It's just
I see.
a word.
I see. Okay.
But yes, but you're right. It's confusing because they do have guns. Some of them.
Right.
And guns are important, I suppose, because of this Second Amendment thing again. Although it's barely mentioned.
Yeah, and also Frank calls it my gear. So he's Tom. I think Tom is the kind of the main character for a while of the series until he's kind of kills himself. Or sorry, he's killed by the army. Spoiler: he kills himself. He's killed by the army. Spoiler: he didn't kill himself.
He does kill himself.
Triple spoiler. So he's seemingly killed by the army, but until then, so in the backstory we get that Tom recruited most of them. Frank calls it his gear, but he didn't know how John built the eyes, or he doesn't understand the tech behind it somehow.
Well, they each bring their own baroque kind of specialty.
Okay.
So Frank Blacksmith provides the basic tech, and they all have their own kind of like bleeding edge angle. Like Tom is a data specialist, and he builds himself like a second brain or something to process all the wireless signals going on around him. Or Dominic is some kind of like bodybuilder, body enhancement or body modification type. And so you take these. This is a thing. This I think this comes up in a lot of Ellis stuff. You take these groups that are sort of on the fringe of society doing weird shit to their bodies or to their minds, and then they've all made themselves into kind of like superheroes. They've made themselves into unique kind of, and I liked that stuff. I like flashbacks where he talks a bit about what went into their gear to make them special, and it really contrasts with the boring ones, the ones the ones that come along later. Where Frank Blacksmith has made super soldiers, and you never see their faces. They just look like bikers. They look like motorcycle. They look like bikers, but not Hell's Angel types. So they're just like people wearing leather and bicycle helmets.
Yeah, and there's it's not the original enhancements, but Tom has lost a leg, and then when he shows up, Dominic gives him a new prosthetic.
Yeah.
And Tom says this line about that's weird. I can feel it. And that line stuck with me for some reason. And I think that's kind of when Warren Ellis really, like when he really tingles, when he crackles, when he's the best, is some of that super high tech stuff.
Yeah.
And just that one line about how he can feel the leg and how weird it feels for the guy doing it. And there's another line in No Hero where they've brought this guy back from the dead, and he's like, I can move my body, but I can't feel it. And that was a kind of haunting line as well.
That's Supergod. But yes.
Oh, yes, Supergod, yes,
Jeremy
right.
Craven from Supergod. Yeah, actually, while we're on the subject, there's nothing interesting technically in No Hero. It's just a magic drug that makes you into a superhero.
Yeah, we'll get to that too, because
we're going to get to a lot of things.
Yeah. So also, in Black Summer, and then we get to so we're there's this political divide between some of the team. At the end of it, one of the characters, I think it's Catherine, says that me, Angel, and Zoe just wanted to help people, which was a really interesting line because it's basically gender divides the team.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, and to three females who wanted to help people, even though those three didn't agree amongst themselves.
Well, the character that we know least about, I think she's called Artemis, and she just rides a motorcycle, and I'm not even sure what her powers are.
Yeah. She morphs the bike. At one time, my bike transforms into a souped-up bike. I don't know.
Like transforming powers.
Yeah.
It's not top of my list in powers, like superpowers I wish I had. But yeah, she's sort of she's the one that talks, the only character that talks about the Second Amendment.
Right.
And she's sort of, what was her deal? She just wanted to. She was a believer in the death penalty, and she thought she was the person. She was the most, I suppose, nihilistic of the lot. She was the one that wanted to just shoot at the problem until it went away.
Yes.
And the Second Amendment was what let her do that.
Right. And Dominic is like, we got to turn ourselves in and That way they will realize the authorities will realize we're not a threat, and then we can start solving the problem of John, who's gone crazy after killing the president. Or
Right, they all do have, although they all had a measure of idealism, and it all just sort of, and then they have to deal, and then how to deal with the issue that John Horace has decided that only he knows right from wrong, and he kills the president.
Yeah, and then at the very end, Tom comes in with a speech. Whose spoilers? Tom's not dead. Comes in with a speech about how John is like Lee Harvey Oswald, and that how history will only remember him as the killer. I feel like it was.
That was one of those lines I like. Sorry to interrupt, but he says something like, "You killed the president. What did you think that made you? Two-fisted Jesus for the American way? It made you Lee Harvey Oswald, you prick."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really like some of Ellis's dialogue. I really love how sardonic and irreverent it is.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
There's a lot of that in Supergod. I really do enjoy it. Anyway, sorry, you were saying, Kumar.
I was saying I think it's not. He waits until the last page almost to give us this speech, and I feel like we get these snippets of everything everywhere, and every issue we get one flashback scene to one character and a few lines of dialogue a page about their political leaning, and I felt like it's not woven into the fabric of the book because there's too much.
It's too short, isn't it? It's
short, and it's not. It's just there's a lot dedicated to blowing stuff up, and here's these F-14s attacking this guy, that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of the theater or the combat theater. These kind of espionage buzzwords keep popping up. I feel like there's too much attention over there. It's not. It's missing the focus and the. I think that's why I felt like it was shallow. Like it's not.
It raises some cool questions, but it doesn't really provide much in the way of answers, does it? I went through Tom Noir's speech at the end again to try and see what Ellis's point was. Like, what is the answer? And there isn't really an answer, is there? He just sort of waffles on a bit about how history doesn't love assassins, and then he uses the Deus Ex Machina gun that he dug out of the grave to wipe out himself, Horace, and Frank's blacksmith all in one go, which ties up the plot, I guess.
Yeah.
But I did like, I mean, this is Watchmen again, but I like how the comic goes into some effort to say, why do people become, what kind of person becomes a superhero?
Right.
Why do they become a superhero? And what happens to a person when they do become a superhero? And I feel that's some of the things about the story that I liked. I liked how you have their idealism, you have the fact that they're kind of like kooky types with funny interests with their, they like their strange Baroque specialties and
well, I think okay, so this is an interesting seg into No Hero, because I think in Black Summer it's more about, are you able to make this technology? Are you able to make a bike that transforms into a super bike? Because if you can do that, and you don't like the fact that there are tanks in the streets, you can be a superhero. Whereas I think in No Hero, the requirement is different. You just have to want to be a superhero super, super bad, and then you'll be recruited.
Yes, well, that's what it says on the surface. But like the guy that wanted to be a superhero really, really bad, he didn't really want that at all. Right. He was just. it seemed like that was what he wanted, but actually he was as broken as a person could possibly be.
Yeah.
He was a complete, psychopath.
Yeah.
He was like a pet psychopath.
Yes.
And so it's like, well, is the kind of person... I kind of liked that. That's one of the things I liked about it. It's like, well, what kind of person becomes a superhero? Well, one of Alan Moore's answers to that question, I suppose, in Watchmen, was why do people become superheroes? They become superheroes because they had a funny childhood, they had a bad childhood, or they were pushed into it by their parents. The same reason people get forced into any profession.
Yeah.
Because of their own insecurities or their own overbearing influences in their life. Well, one of the things I like about No Hero is that Ellis says, okay, I take that to the logical extreme. Why does a person become a superhero? Because they're a pet psychopath that the FBI uses to troubleshoot horrible scenarios, and they've let him out of the box they keep him in and told him that he really wants to be a superhero, and that's why he wants to be a superhero.
Do you think Ellis has? Do you think he's cheated? So what I mean is, for several issues, for 4 or 5 issues, we got this guy who is desperate to be a superhero. So in this world, we've got this team, a small team of superheroes who are run by this guy whose name, Carrick Masterson.
Yes.
So in the 60s, right. So in the 60s, Carrick Masterson developed this drug. It's basically a variation of LSD, which makes you a superhero. But he doesn't know it doesn't know what powers it's going to give you or anything. You just take the drug and it has a random effect. It's almost like the X-Men or like the Fantastic Four. You get hit by cosmic rays and the effect is different. Right.
Not quite, Kumar. It's like a response to who you are.
Okay.
It's what TV tropes calls personality powers.
Okay.
So if what's the similar? Have you read like the Wild Card series?
No.
By the George R.R. Martin edits. So that's very similar. In the Wildcard series, you contract like a virus, and you have a chance of manifesting superpowers, but they come from your unconscious,
right,
or subconscious. So the powers you end up with, it depends on what you bring with you into the room when you take the drug.
Right. Okay. So right, so Carrick Masterson has used this drug to turn people into superpowers over the years, and he controls this team, and they basically, initially when they appear in 1966 and they're called the Levelers, he says, we're here to keep the world safe. We don't want to rule, own, or control anything. So then this kid shows up, and he is out fighting crime at night like Batman, and he's desperate to get noticed. He really, really, really wants the drug and to become a superhero. So for 4 issues, the thesis of this series is about this guy who wants to be a superhero, or 4, 5, 6 issues. But then suddenly we get this twist at the end where we learn, it's a very bizarre twist.
He's the boy in the box.
It's almost right. He was kept trapped by a serial killer for years and effectively tortured and abused by this guy, and then he became this, in a sense, a person who was so malleable he would do anything to survive.
He becomes like a chameleon.
It's such a weird twist. It's almost like have you ever read A Handful of Dust?
No.
That novel. Hang on, I'm going to Google it right now to remember. It was by Evelyn Waugh. So it was the Evelyn Waugh. It was from 1934, and it was like, it's almost like a Victorian parlor drama for 100 pages or 150 pages, and at the end of the book, spoiler, the main character ends up in the jungle in South America and is held hostage by this old man who makes him read books to him every day for the rest of his life until he dies. It's like a crazy twist. And this struck me as pretty like, whoa, okay. But my question from earlier is it cheating to seem like Ellis was going to answer the question of how much do you want to be a superhero, and then take that away because the guy actually doesn't want to be a superhero? Well, I mean, or is there a point to it? How did you read this?
Well, it's like I was saying before. I like the twisting of that concept that only messed up people want to be superheroes. And it's like, well, here's the most messed up. If that's the case, here's the most messed up person imaginable.
Right.
He doesn't even really want to be a superhero. In fact, the only reason he wants to be a superhero is because he's been sent there and told he's been told you have to ingratiate yourself with this guy, and he'll want you to become a superhero, and then you have to murder him and everyone in the building. Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, like I was saying, this is probably my least favorite of the 3. No, well, it's definitely my least favorite of the 3, because of its really kind of grim tone.
Oh yeah, and I mean,
grim but really like flat. and horrible.
Yeah,
tone.
and it's beyond that. I mean, it's one thing to see a drawing of someone turned into a pile of flying meat, but it's another thing to see somebody's spine ripped out and worn as a dildo.
Yeah.
Which is it's something like that's like something out of Garth Ennis's Crossed, where it's pushed as extreme. And I was like, why? Even if he was kept in a box, like why would he? So his thing is his penis has fallen off as part of the process. As part of the transformation into superhero process after he's taken the drug, his penis has fallen off, and for some reason this makes him want to rip out a guy's spine and wear. Like, what's the logic behind this?
Well, there's no logic. I don't think. I think it's just he's crazy, and like up to that point, he'd been so clean cut and.
Yes, but he swears because he's written by Garth Ennis, so he says the F word a lot.
Yeah.
He doesn't touch any drugs or drink. It's very, but I don't know if it was deliberate. Like, is Ellis showing us that actually he's not who we think he is from the beginning, or is it just that that's his habitual way of writing?
Writing anybody. I couldn't say. I'd like to say the former, but I'm not ruling out the latter.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, and you're right. And also, it really turns on a dime.
Yeah.
Like he's almost this pathetic. He's this pathetic figure.
Yeah.
For because the process which turns him into a superhero goes so poorly. Apparently, it often goes poorly. Like this character Warwick Carrick Masterson, he throws people into the meat grinder by giving them this drug and then putting them in a creepy room.
Yeah.
And where they have the worst trip imaginable for 12 hours, and hopefully they wake up at the end with superpowers, but quite often they don't. They wake up misshapen monsters, or they blow up, apparently. Well, this character, the boy, he's called Joshua Carver, or that's not his real name, but that's his name when we're introduced to him. He goes through the process, and it's awful. Like, all his skin sloughs off, his penis falls off, as you pointed out, and he looks like what does he look like? He looks like a sock puppet.
Yeah.
He's a pathetic figure, and at the same time, we're like, oh, and all he wanted was to be a superhero. All he wanted was, he's worked so hard for it, and now look, he's barely holding it together, and he looks like a sock puppet, and all he wants is to be a superhero. And then, like, almost on a page, he announces, "I'm crazy," and starts ripping people's spines out. And
I think there's maybe one line in the previous issue or something. It's just like a tease of like, oh, there's something. He just says something weird or something, and you're like, what? And then,
well, he butchers the guy's whatever he's the guy's personal assistant, or the guy with machines in his head.
Yeah.
He butchers him, but that happens off screen.
Yeah.
And that is discovered, and where he says something really out of character to the only half decent character in the comic, the guy called Red Glare. He says to him, "They don't let me near girls. I live in a box most of the time."
Right, that was the line.
Was like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, where did that come from? And then and then it just goes up to 11, and he starts ripping people's spines out and swearing and acting, and just acting like a horrible psychopathic jerk.
Yeah.
It's very jarring. So do I think it? So the question, how did we get onto this? Is it cheating?
Yeah, I don't know. And this is another one where, like as in Black Summer, where as the series progresses, you learn that actually this is not our world. This is a world where fascism ruled the streets, authoritarian fascism. In this series, when we get to issue 6, suddenly we discover we're not in the same world. We're in an alternate dimension where Nixon has won a second term. The French didn't have nuclear weapons. India doesn't have nuclear weapons. There's an institution of the black states in America or something, which these supers have set up. So we don't.
These sort of details to us as it goes along. I mean, it seems at first that it's our world, but it just has some really odd and unappealing superhero types in it that wear leather. It
isn't until this one speech in issue 6 where it's like, oh, wait a second, we're in a different place entirely.
Yes,
that's been altered.
I don't hate that. I kind of like. I felt like that's a gentle, subtle reveal that.
Yeah.
Masterson has been running the world
Yes.
for 50 years, and it's a very different world to ours. And he just tweaks stuff for his own purposes.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't do it, unlike John Horus, he's not a good guy at all. In fact, he goes out of his way to point out that he's been bad from the start. He's some kind of drug pusher, user manipulative type that stumbled on the formula for superheroes in the 60s and said, I can set up an operation where I can do anything I want.
Right.
And I can make the world any way I like.
He's also supposed to be American. He announces that he's American,
Yes.
but he sounds very British.
Yeah, he does. Calling the levels. I mean,
I think Ellis forgot that he was supposed to be American.
Yeah.
Because there's so many. I even noted some. I don't know if I can find in my notes, but
He mentioned crumpets or tea or something at some point.
Yeah, he says, "Come with Joshua." Not come with me. And at one point, somebody puts a glass on the table, and he says, "That glass lives there, does it?" And there was just constantly. He just sounded really British, but anyway.
Well, he doesn't. Yeah, he's just a really unlikable character.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that's part of it. He, as I said, we get this drip-fed reveal that the world it might have looked similar on the surface, but actually it's completely different to the world that we know, and it's because of Masterson. Because
right.
Masterson wants social stability because then that's a safer world for him.
Right.
And I mean, it's like I said, what I wrote down in my notes. So what happens when the Justice League has been running the world for 50 years and they just tweak society and they just tweak the environment in the ways that they think are the most beneficial for, well, in this case, themselves. But I mean, ultimately, ultimately, I mean, where does the Justice League's idea of what constitutes a successful society come from? In the case of Masterson, it's so that I believe that a line from the comic is, the more stable society is, the more money will be made that will be eventually given to me. And
yes.
The more girls that will be born that I will eventually sleep with.
Yes.
And that's his idea of the greater good, because he's a complete user and asshole.
Yes, and he also says it does people good to have superpowered heroes and makes them think they're incapable of doing anything for themselves. That forms the basis of a society that's useful to me.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a riff on
a line there.
Yeah, it's a kind of a riff on. There's that Swamp Thing issue where he was like, "Should I fix the environment?" And at the end, he's like, "No, I shouldn't, because if I do it, then people won't do anything for themselves."
Well, of course, but Yes, you're right. And then, of course, it's the response to this on the part of the world, which I suppose forms the more interesting part of the comic, which is that all the national governments of the world know they're being run by superheroes and they hate it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing they can do about it because they're superheroes.
Coming up, is Black Summer a response to Watchmen or Marvel's Civil War? I'm continuing to republish classic episodes of Deconstructing Comics in reverse order, unlocked by our patrons' generous support. This week I'll republish number 54 from December 18th, 2006. It's a comic, it's a movie, but made simultaneously. We discuss the graphic novel Pathfinder by Leata Kalogridis and Christopher Shy. Find the classic episodes on our Facebook and Twitter feeds by choosing the earliest months listed on the sidebar pull-down menu at deconstructingcomics.com, in publicly available posts on our Patreon page, or in the Patreon smartphone app. Classic episodes have been unlocked back to number 46, so classic episode re-releases will stop in 8 weeks unless we meet our next Patreon goal. And you can help make our Fullmetal Alchemist podcast a reality as well. Check out all our goals and help us reach them at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
Let me ask a plot question. Why? So there's kind of a Watchmen type conspiracy to kill superheroes happening in this book. So 2 or 3 of them get killed, and then one of them, and then
that connection. You're quite right there. Yeah, go on.
At a press conference, well, there's a conspiracy against superheroes in Black Summer as well, sort of. But in this, so they're being killed off one by one. There's a press conference, and somebody tries to kill Joshua Carver, who is the FBI plant. Now, my question is, why did somebody try to assassinate him? Did the left hand not know what the right hand was doing?
Yeah, I don't know. That bit was confusing to me too. There didn't seem to be any reason for it.
Yeah.
Like, they wanted his gross face to be, like, the end result, like, he doesn't take any damage because he's invulnerable. But the end result is that his gross face is revealed to the world,
right,
and it undermines, I suppose, the public trust in Masterson's superheroes. But that doesn't make sense because there's no way that the conspiracy could have known that he was going to end up looking like a sock puppet.
Yeah, and they didn't know he was going to be invulnerable either.
No, exactly. So it doesn't make sense. I don't think it does make sense.
Okay. Well,
but I mean, but the conspiracy is that all the governments of the world who all hate and mistrust each other, they all unite essentially behind the scenes to get rid of Masterson and his superheroes. It's a multinational effort spanning decades where they secretly kidnap one of the superheroes and spend a decade keeping him on the edge of death, dissecting him to find out how his physiology works. Right. They develop chemicals that can melt the flesh of even the super durable superheroes, and they engineer this situation where they pick off enough of the superheroes that Masterson badly needs to recruit a new member, and he ends up looking past any flaws that Carver, the too perfect candidate, has, and making him a superhero overnight. And then, of course, once he gets superpowers, he goes on this rampage and murders everybody and ends up tossing Masterson into space.
Right. And now that Masterson's gone, Ozymandias can release the giant squid without being foiled.
Well, he can release it. Well, that is the releasing of the giant squid.
Yeah.
So instead of Ozymandias, it's everyone, all the governments, all the government agencies and in the world have stood up, got together and said, we can't be run by, we refuse to be run by these heroes. And it's not a positive outcome. I don't think Ellis wants us to think it's a positive outcome because so many people get murdered.
No, and in fact, in the last couple of panels, we get these clips of news reports of all kinds of stuff going wrong and wars starting and all sorts of stuff that had been held at bay by this guy and his control of the puppet strings. But it's kind of, I guess he's saying that better to have a shitty world with freedom than a fascist world with, a safe world.
I think his deliberate effort to include the fact that the world goes to pot as soon as Masterson, bad as he was, disappears, is his way of saying maybe not better to have freedom in a knapsack world.
Yeah.
And he wants to have it both ways, I think. Like Masterson is clearly evil.
Yes.
And he did create stability, and as soon as he was gone, everyone went back to slapping the shit out of each other and stopped working together the way they had been doing previously, and the world goes to pot quickly. I think Ellis wants to have his cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
He wants you to answer that question.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be putting these words in Ellis's mouth. Maybe he's just created these characters and these situations, and it's up. Yeah, maybe it is up to us to decide.
I think as far as Black Summer and No Hero goes, I think they're almost what's a trilogy? But there's two things.
I don't know, duology?
Dyad, a duology. They almost stand apart from Supergod as being almost like Ellis's idea of a grown-up response on the part of people to superheroes. So, like, in the case of the Seven Guns, where they become vigilantes, Ellis thinks that the government will just smack them down.
Right.
Instantly. No one's going to put up with vigilantes, especially when there's a chance they might kill the president, and then they do kill the president. They're just going to smack him down. There's quite a good quote from that Ellis, when talking about Black Summer when it was first released. He considers it, I think, a response to Marvel's Civil War series, where as we know in Civil War, the superheroes have to decide: are we going to police ourselves, or are we going to, or are we just going to keep doing what we're doing? I mean, what's the right response here? Are we, and Ellis says that's childish. Like, the authorities would never let superheroes decide whether or not they were going to police themselves. They would police them, and they would police them hard. He says, this is a quote from him: "This is a freedom of doing a piece of superhero fiction outside the auspices of company ownership or the weight of continuity. The big questions can be asked in a direct and brutal manner. In this world, the world of Black Summer, masked adventurers are on the run and are not going to be pursued, tricked, or trapped by their estranged colleagues. Every last one of them is going to be hunted by the combined forces of the US military structure. It is, to my mind, what would always happen. The streets of America would be secured by soldiers and gun emplacements and helicopters against the threat of the flying superhuman." And then he goes on to say, "And for those who think I'm being anti-American, consider this. In Britain, we just have the SAS kill them in their beds. You people are young and have not yet learned how to do business." So yeah, I think Ellis, and in this and in No Hero, I think Ellis is saying, this is what would happen.
I
this
think
is what governments do. They wipe out threats to themselves. They are the ones that have the monopoly on the use of violence and the use of force within their borders.
Yeah.
And what do you think about that?
I have two. My response is: does Civil War need a response? I don't know if a comic for 12-year-olds really needs to be. We need to go hard at that.
I suppose not. I might be biased here because if I could share an anecdote from my personal past, probably about 10 or so years ago, my brother held a costume party and I dressed up as Rorschach, Watchmen, and I was chatting to one of my brother's friends, and we were talking about Watchmen because I was dressed as Rorschach, and he said, "Yeah, I don't really like Watchmen. I think it's a bit boring. You should read Civil War."
I love your brother, but I know that type of person. I have encountered them. Usually online, not in person.
Yeah, it was really the most fatuous thing I'd ever heard anybody say ever, and I ended that conversation pretty quick. But yeah, so I suppose that's why I felt like Civil War needed a response, because that guy said something to me once at a party when I was dressed as these two series are for people who have read Civil War but not Watchmen, because this is the answer to those two. It's like Watchmen again, or something like that. But I think the problem here is Ellis has gotten distracted by the violence again. I think that's problematic. And I also think, again, Reap is not quite the guy to pull this off, because there's a scene where one character goes away. She's like, okay, I'm parked around the block, so I'm going to go. Then there's a car bomb goes off, and everybody runs out, and it's next to the house. It's not around the block. And it's that kind of stuff that's
it's distracting. It's not Dave Gibbons in Watchmen, you know what I mean, where every little bit is accounted for and inserts you into that world. You can't have one thing be super realistic, like here's a realistic take on if you gave these guys these super drugs, and then have a person run out across the block around the block and have it be right where they're standing, if you know what I mean.
It's true. I wonder if we're being fair comparing all this stuff to Watchmen all the time. Anyway, I mean, Watchmen is a masterpiece.
Yes, and it's not fair. But then, okay, great seg into Supergods, which opens with Miracle Man / Marvel Man, where you're looking at the Thames and Big Ben and everything's been destroyed and everyone's dead, and you open the pages and you're like, I've seen this. I've seen this exact page. Why am I looking at this?
Oh, the notorious destruction of London.
Yeah. You cannot help but think about it. It's so funny that Ellis is not a hack, and he's friends with Alan Moore, and it's not like he's writing before Watchmen. He's not garbage. He knows what he's doing, but it seems so weird to go so hard. Like, you cannot draw that scene in a superhero comic and not. He must be saying to the reader, I want you to think of Miracle Man. And it's funny because Miracle Man, Marvel Man was also about superheroes becoming gods, because he becomes a god at the end of that, and he's like, here's how the world's going to work. But the thesis in this one is, what if humans built superheroes because we wanted gods? Or what if we automatically interpreted super beings as gods? Which is a funny... Or
like, what if a super being is by definition as unknowable and alien as a god?
Right. And it's interesting because...
Miracle Man starts as being... Oh, sorry, not Miracle Man. Marvel Man starts as being very human.
Yes.
Doesn't he? I mean, and becomes, as a consequence of his powers, detached and godlike. Whereas I think... Whereas in Supergod, the things are gods from the start.
Right.
Right. Ellis says that, like, there's no way, like, Superman isn't going to go around rescuing cats.
Yeah. Right.
You'd be lucky to get him to notice you.
Right.
Well, Ellis is, and if he did notice you, that would probably be bad.
Right.
So this is my favorite of the three, for sure, and yeah, it's very much like Marvel Man. I agree.
Well, it's like Marvel Man. I think it is my favorite of the three, but I have some issues with it. I think it almost doesn't function as a comic book, because basically we get this guy who's a scientist on one of the projects. So every country has basically built their own Supergod, a superhero, a super being, which is effectively a god. And various countries have built them, and this guy was working on the British one.
Yeah. Just like Marvel Man.
Right. And the world has been effectively, now it starts basically at the end of the story when the gods have fought and the world is a wreck. It's all in ruins. It's been razed. And it's narrated by him, but it's narrated... There's almost no conversations. There's almost no sequential art. It's like we get a bit of dialogue from him where he says, well, we built this thing, and then we get one image. And you could almost take out all of the artwork from the series and it almost wouldn't matter, because it's basically a monologue by him. And that was kind of my biggest issue with it. And it's a little bit monotone. I think he's kind of funny at times. But it's kind of the same thing again and again for 5 issues.
I suppose. I do like the humor.
Yeah.
I didn't have as much. I didn't have a big problem with the storytelling style.
Okay.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't mind it, and I know that it doesn't. I remember you saying when you first read it, although perhaps you don't, that you didn't. You would have liked a bit more detail on some of the superheroes of the artificial ones, like, because they'll appear for a page, and Ellis will dazzle us with some of his typical futurist kind of description, where he'll talk about this Russian superhero they made, that the kleptocracy, the Russian kleptocracy made in the 21st century. Oh, they grafted the brain of the original cyborg and into different parts of his legs, and it was the first industrialization of human consciousness on a large scale. And like, this sounds cool. And then on the next page, he's just in a big axe fight with Krishna, and that's the end of that.
Yeah.
Like, I would have liked to have heard a bit more about that. I remember you saying, and that was a good point. So yeah, it has its limitations, this storytelling.
And it's almost, I mean, it's kind of Black Summer and No Hero in a sense, or they set up superheroes with a bit of, we get a bit of the science behind them, we even get a bit of the politics behind them, and then they're basically there to fight the hell out of each other, which is, you know, I always loved that the climax of Watchmen was a fight with a fork and a dinner plate. Right. That to me was amazing. So yeah, they basically set up, and then there's these huge kind of battles. We should also mention that the art in this one is by somebody named Gary Gastoni, who's pretty competent unless he wants to show people panicking and screaming, and then the drawings are pretty terrible.
I like the art in Supergod a lot better than in the preceding two.
Yeah, it's.
But yes, everyone sort of looks the same when when they're screaming.
Right.
And everyone is screaming when they're dead as well. No one's just dead. They all died horribly.
Yeah, they really struggle to.
I guess that's a theme of the comic.
Yeah. But you know, when Reap, when he tried to draw children, there's a scene where they're out on the street and kids are crossing the road. They all look like the Garbage Pail Kids movie. Like they looked like really ugly, freakish.
They look like dwarves, or they look like little people. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, so this anyway. Normally, Gastoni's pretty good, and a lot of it is just basically, draw these two guys fighting the crap out of each other. There's no real confusion, more or less. At least not as much as there was with the Reap stuff. But again, it's mostly he's just drawing. It's almost like a picture book where like you get an image. It's not really sequential art.
Yes, what you mean by that, yeah.
But yeah, we were going to talk about
in Supergod. I like some of the covers.
Yes, yeah, and the covers are by I can't remember his name, but he paints Massafera or something. He paints a lot of the covers for Avatar.
Ah, okay.
Sometimes
they're really cool.
Yeah, Philippe Massafera, I think is his name. There also, on page 4 of the series, we get the suggestion that man is hardwired for religion.
Yeah.
And if that is true, then this should have occurred in the other two series as well. Which is why I think it's really interesting, because I really think it's like only one thesis can exist in each world. I don't think you can put them together. Like, there's no Dr. Manhattan, you know what I mean, where one guy is the god in the series. It's like, okay, this one, they're all gods. None of them are... Although it's very weird that the U.S. Supergod is the $6 million man. Although they say he costs $6.5 billion, but just putting the number 6 there is like, okay.
It's a very good reference. Oh yeah.
And then he says, I always wanted to fight crime, which is weird. Like, he was a pilot. Why is this line in here? It's
just a line to remind us of superheroes, because that's what superheroes do in superhero canon, right? They fight crime.
Yeah.
It's not like the Authority, like some of Ellis's other stuff, like Planetary or the Authority, where they do global scale things. Superheroes in most superhero comics, I'm telling you your own business here, Kumar. Superheroes in superhero comics fight crime. So I think it's sort of a wink and a nudge, sort of like just reminding us that he's a crazy he's a crazy cyborg that has to live in a fake heaven in order to not wig out.
Look, I think it's a really...
U.S. government made him maybe maybe they wanted him to fight crime.
I think it's clumsy, because basically we have this guy who's Steve Austin. He's a pilot of some sort. He crashes. He wears the same orange jumpsuit that the $6 million man wears. They rebuilt him for $6.5 billion as a cyborg. And he's never fought any crime. Even after they've rebuilt him, he doesn't fight crime. And then his first line of dialogue that we hear from him is, I always wanted to fight crime.
It's a fourth wall breaking moment. I think, Ellis is... It's a reminder that, hey, remember what I'm subverting here?
Right.
I'm talking about how, just in case you forgot.
And the book is called Supergods or Supergod. It's kind of hard to miss.
Yeah, and there's even a passage like speaking of breaking the fourth wall, there's that section where one of the creations speaks to us, the reader, in a 100% fourth wall breaking moment.
Is he speaking to us, or is he speaking to the guy, the scientist?
No,
Simon
he's not
Redden.
speaking to the scientist. Well, technically, he's not speaking to the scientist or us. Diegetically speaking, he's talking to hypothetical future observers who have developed a remote viewing
Whoa!
Technology in one of the futures that exists.
Oh, I love it. That's better than what I thought it was.
Yeah, but you're right. As a storytelling device, the comic frames it as a discussion between the scientist and the creation.
Okay.
But he's also talking to us. But the in-universe explanation is that he's talking to theoretical future observers that he can see because of his temporal viewing ability that he possesses.
Okay, right.
I just really like that.
That is cool. Yeah.
It was cool. Yeah, more Ellis coolness. I think it's about as subtle as a hammer, but I like the biological determinism, religion stuff. I get that Ellis is an atheist, and this is very much, it's like, this is the consequences of theism. Ellis is telling us you're going to build a golden calf that's going to take to the skies and rain down fire on us at some point. That's the consequence of religion. So stop it, everybody. But yeah, I like that. There's a lot I like about this comic.
I think there's a parallel to No Hero in that in No Hero they don't know exactly how the drug is going to manifest.
Right.
Where here they build these gods and they don't really know what they're going to do.
No, no one can, because their
gods
and their worldview puts them on a plane that we can't understand.
Well, they've imprinted Krishna with the desire to save India.
Yes.
But they don't know what form that's going to take. And it's a bit like the story of Superman Red and Superman Blue, where Superman builds this machine so he can save the world, and he doesn't know exactly how it's going to work, and he walks into it, and then two Supermen walk out.
Right.
And it's like kind of somehow I was more forgiving of it in this than in that, because it really was obviously a way to just create storytelling mechanisms to have these differently. Because it's a lot different than one guy having wings and one guy being able to shoot lasers out of his eyes or whatever. It's like this guy can see through time, or this guy can alter the environment, or this thing reacts to spores.
Protoplasm, Well, this guy has an atomic destabilizing field that turns everything into dust around himself.
Yeah. I didn't like that none of the super gods had penises. It was weird to me that it's just this childish thing that Avatar does, where you can literally show a guy ripping another person's spine on and then tying it on with their skin. But you can't show, and these, I think one of them is supposed to be an angel, so that's forgivable, but a lot of these people they're flying around naked and they're just like Ken dolls.
Yeah, it's disappointing. But I suppose everyone you say that that's something Avatar does. Okay.
I think it's a lot of publishers, except for Watchmen.
I feel like, on the other hand, if you put a dick on some of these characters, people will just, look, it's Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's exactly, you're true. Yeah, you're right. Actually, it would just make it more of a Watchmen ripoff, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess maybe it could be, I think, either explanation kind of. But yeah, I just like how it goes in early and it goes in hard with some of these concepts that.
Yeah. And I like that it reaches the natural conclusion that the world is basically destroyed. And because humanity has followed their religious impulse and created superhumans according to that religious impulse, they've effectively killed themselves.
Yeah.
by introducing gods into the world. And I think this one follows through, unlike Black Summer, where we just get the Oswald speech at the end, and No Hero, which switches tack near the end. This one is
Black Summer, doesn't it? Whereas in No Hero, everything falls apart, but we don't see any of the consequences, not really. But yeah, we see it in Supergod.
Yeah.
Yeah, the world is completely destroyed.
Yeah. I think this one definitely follows through, and it sticks to the theme more. It's like more pervasive throughout. So much so that it's like, oh, really? Is this? Are we going to count the $6 Million Man as a god too? But yeah, he's in the.
His godhood, I feel like, was the shakiest of the lot. I mean, he was profoundly weird.
Yeah.
They keep him in, as I was saying, they keep him in an Ersatz heaven.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
I think it might be underground, a dome where it's a 50s suburban street.
Yeah.
With a white picket fence, and he sits on his porch and drinks beer all day and waits for America to call on him, because he believes that America has the ability to reach heaven.
Yes, well, that's right, and he himself believes he lives in heaven. That's right, and that somehow limos show up from the United States sometimes to pick him up.
Sorry, Jerry, we need you again. Oh, and I mean, his initials, he's Jerry
Craven and Joshua Carver.
Yeah, JC both times. Yeah.
Yep.
Subtle.
And Cthulhu shows up in Supergods and No Hero as well, because in this one of the gods forms himself into Cthulhu, and in No Hero, one of the visions he sees is of Cthulhu when he's going through his drug transformation.
Yeah, one of the pages those are the pages I sort of skipped over, I think, because they're just so busy. I can't focus on them. But yeah, I do love that Cthulhu shows up in Supergod.
Yes.
But, and Maitreya, the Chinese Chinese Supergod, he rides Cthulhu into battle.
Right.
Cthulhu is made up of, I think, the population of China at that point.
Right.
It's just bonkers.
Yeah.
I love how over the top this comic is as well.
And then someone gets thrown into space at the very end, much like the end of No Hero. So there's definitely.
That's one of the cataclysms. The angel with the matter destabilizing field is launched by Krishna into space, and he punctures the moon.
Right.
And the moon breaks up. His field makes the moon break up, and then the moon starts to rain down on the Earth. So it's just yet another thing that's gone wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So are they all at the end of Supergod? Are they all dead except for the one that was like fungal spores?
Morrigan, the spore one, the Fantastic Four god.
Right, the Fantastic Four one. Yeah.
He's the only one that's left, and he's triumphant. He lives on the bodies of dead humanity, essentially.
Right.
Yes, the rest are all gone.
Okay.
Because the fourth wall breaking one destroys Krishna and Jerry Craven right when they were about to fix everything.
Right. Well, I was going to ask, my final question was going to be if you're going to recommend only one of the three.
I think that's clear to anyone that's listening.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I feel perhaps I know it's a trilogy. Like, I'll read the Ellis quote now that I hinted at the beginning of our discussion. He said, Black Summer was about superhumans who were too human. No Hero was about superhumans who were inhuman. Supergod is about superhumans who are no longer human at all, but something else.
You know what? Watchmen is about all three of those.
Of course.
Because you've got the comedian, and you've got Dr. Manhattan and Rorschach and all the rest of it.
So, audience of Deconstructing Comments, if it's not clear yet, Kumar thinks you should just go reread Watchmen.
Yeah.
And I think you should read Supergod.
Yeah, and I also think there's other Warren Ellis stuff out there that's super smart and fun as well, and kind of grabbed me more, and kind of maybe hit some of the same notes, but was better pulled off. I feel like this was, especially as a response to Civil War.
Yes.
Unnecessary. Was this really? Did we need 21 issues of? Anyway.
I like that. Well, I mean, I take your point, and I think it's solid. I, on the other hand, like that they're just they're almost like short stories.
Yes, that's true.
They're just the short thematic riffs on this concept. Comics. One thing comics do better than is that anything else is in critical examinations of their own mythology, arguably. And it can't be we can't just say Alan Moore did it all. There's got to be something left for those of us who carry on. And I like these. I like that they're short and punchy, and that they tease out an element of the genre and look at it shine a light on it for 6 issues or so. And I think they're really good. I recommend.
Black Summer, No Hero, and Supergod are published by Avatar. Support this and all of our shows by joining us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics for more details. You can also help us out by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. Do your shopping at deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon so that we get a percentage of the sale. And share our episodes on your social media. We appreciate your support in bringing Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Poles to a larger audience. Help us get higher in podcast rankings by subscribing. It's free, and you'll get episodes as soon as they come out. Most any smartphone or tablet comes with a podcast app installed, so if you're not using it yet, try it out. It's the best way to listen to podcasts. But of course, you can always listen to all our episodes at deconstructingcomics.com or on our YouTube channel. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulela and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Mulela and I will be here next week to critique Adventures of God by Corey and Tio. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.